Hey folks, it's Ash from being SWENGLISH, and normally this channel is about Sweden and British people. But I just got back from Istanbul, and this is my guide on how to make the best of this great city. So Istanbul's not a location that I thought of travelling to before, so we thought we'd give it a bit of a try. And it is genuinely a really interesting place, full of culture, history, from the Romans to the Ottomans and then to the Turks. It's also a surprisingly green city, despite being a major city with a gigantic population. Everywhere's full of trees and greenery, which is really nice. It's definitely not a concrete jungle. There's lots of things to do here. The food is really tasty, the portions are gigantic. The drink is good as well. There's a local beer called Efes, which is quite fresh and tasty. But anyway, let's run through my tips to make the most of Istanbul. Really important note when you're planning your way to get here as well. Do not pre-book transfers from the airport to your hotel. You'll pay a fortune, potentially €100. For no reason. Instead, when you get here, fire up the Uber app or jump into one of the millions of yellow cabs here, and you'll end up paying probably about 400 lira, which is about 250 krona or £20. So it's really unnecessary. Prior to getting here as well, you might find the hotel bombarding you with email spam advertising transfers at great prices, but it is entirely a scam. Just jump in a cab, preferably an Uber, and you'll get here cheaply and in no time. Next one applies to where you're travelling to any big city, and that's bags. Don't wear a rucksack because you can't see it unless you wear it on your front, and in that case it looks a bit silly. Instead, buy yourself what I call a man bag, which looks like this. It's front facing, or you can swing it around to the back if you want it out of the way if you're somewhere safe, but it just means everything, all your possessions are always in your sight and easily accessible when you need them. You're obviously going to want to bring with you your mobile phone, and what you'll find here is there's no free Wi-Fi anywhere. They all need you to sign up and type in your mobile number and get an SMS, which probably then signs you up for life for spam and nonsense. So one recommendation is to check your mobile provider. For example, Telia provide a semester package, a holiday package, which you add on for about £20 or £25 or so. That gives you data and roaming, etc. whilst you're in Turkey. But be wary, because they only give you about a gigabyte, and a gigabyte goes very quickly if you're browsing Facebook, downloading photos, looking up maps and using Uber and other apps. Be careful as well before you land and turn your phone on to turn off roaming, because as soon as your phone starts connecting to data here, you'll automatically, with most providers, incur a daily charge. With Telia, for example, it's 99 krona, which is about £8 a day, but it only gives you 100 megabyte. Most phones will use that up immediately as soon as you turn it back on after flying, with downloading emails, Facebook and all of your notifications. So be very, very careful. The other option is to buy a temporary SIM card whilst you're here, but they might not really be worth it. The next and really important one is to plan before you get here. There is so much to do in Istanbul, and if you don't plan, then you're probably not going to make the most of your week here. It's an absolutely gigantic city with loads of archipelagos, islands and different parts and sides of the city. In fact, there's actually an Asian side and a European side, and they're both very different. The Asian side is more traditional, a bit quieter, whilst the European side is a bit more touristy, a bit crazy, noisy, busy, bustly. Now don't let that put you off. It's definitely worth visiting the European side, but be prepared for it to be a little bit more hectic. So before you head over to Istanbul, look at where you're going to go. Plan your days very carefully. You can't just walk anywhere here. It's pretty much a case of having to travel via either taxi, train, boat, underground or a tram. Make sure you plan the journeys carefully, and also consider that the traffic here is insane. You can easily be stuck for half an hour in a queue of traffic over one of the big bridges here, and that could ruin your day. Plan very carefully, and ideally speak to somebody who's been here before, and they'll give you tips and tricks on how to plan your days most efficiently. Choosing where to stay is also an interesting one. We actually stayed on the Asian side at a hotel called the Wyndham Grand, which was really, really good. Nice hotel, quiet at night, not crazy, and also we had stuff that we could walk to from the hotel, although not a lot, because the Asian side is a bit quieter. If you do stay on the touristy side, just be careful to book a hotel that's not in the middle of everything, because at night the last thing you want is pumping music, crazy people running around, and lots of beeping from cars on the road. The other thing to look out for, of course, is it is a Muslim country and therefore there are loads of mosques here all over the place. If you book a hotel next to a mosque, be prepared for lots of prayer music being blasted out of the speakers on the buildings, and it's about 5 times a day. Some people find it very peaceful and relaxing, but whether you will very early in the morning or very late at night is another question. As mentioned, getting around Istanbul can be challenging, but it's key that you get it right because there is so much to do here. But if you don't plan your transport and travel carefully, you won't get to do anything. Now, taxis are the easiest and cheapest way around. They're everywhere. They drive like crazy people, but you can just jump in them, pay them cash. That's fine. However, I highly recommend downloading the Uber app. They have it here in Turkey. At least then you know who's driving you. You can look at their star rating and it's a little bit safer. Plus, there's far less chance of them ripping you off as well when you get to your destination or going the wrong way. Also note, however, when you arrive, you'll quite often find that they'll add a little bit onto the total. My advice is to stay in the cab when you arrive at your destination, look at how much they add on and make sure that they stop the journey as well. Because otherwise you could jump out the taxi and the driver might not stop the journey for another 10 minutes. So just be very, very wary. Also, just to note, the driving experience here is very unique and a little bit crazy. It's important to remember that taxis are not the only way to navigate Istanbul. You can also jump on boats, get some really good views along the water and around the islands. Also, the trams are a very interesting experience, and I'm struggling to understand how people aren't run over by them on a daily basis because they drive at such speed through the little narrow, windy streets. But definitely also have a look at those, and the underground is also an interesting experience. It's very, very old and really good to look at. You might be surprised that despite Istanbul being a major city here, there isn't a lot of people English speaking. So you might find yourself struggling at times. So I'd recommend learning the basics at least, which will help you make your way around Istanbul and hopefully make yourself a little bit better understood as well. Also important to remember that Istanbul is a city, it's not really a beachy destination. Therefore, if you're looking for swimming, soft sand, beaches and shoreline in that respect, you're not really going to find it here. Scattered around the islands there are some very small beaches, and I mean a couple of meters long, but you're not going to need your swimming flippers here. However, you can jump in the sea, although it does get a little bit wavy. It's actually a very, very famous stretch of water running right through the middle of Istanbul here called the Bosphorus, and that's kind of like their version of the Suez Canal, where they have a major shipping route, and you see the boats quite often queuing up in that stretch of water to pass through it. A lot of history around it. There's also an amazing castle set up either side of it at one point with a lot of history. Definitely a place worth visiting. Before travelling, we were made aware of potential scams. For example, there's one where someone will drop something walking towards you or shout for help, and you pick it up for them, and when you pick it up they then charge you for it, or try at least. That didn't happen to us. There was a lady walking along offering you water, which at first looked like it was free, but I think if you grabbed a bottle she'd probably charge you. Just keep your eyes peeled, but we didn't encounter anything like that in the week that we were in Istanbul. It seemed like a pretty fair place. Finally, at the gate in the airport, so just thought I'd talk about a few places that are worth visiting, because as I said, if you don't plan ahead, you're not going to get a chance to visit any of them. So definitely recommend heading to a little place called Kadıköy, which is very live, bustling, lots of shops, and hidden in the middle of it is also the famous Spice Bazaar. There are a few of them, new and old and ancient, hundreds of years old. There's also a great archaeology museum. Highly recommend having a look at that place with incredibly ancient sarcophaguses of famous leaders and people. There are also lots of museums around there, but be wary, the queues for some of these places can be really, really long. As mentioned earlier, there's also an incredible castle that's being restored on the banks of the Bosphorus. Really, really cool place to visit. Really, really interesting and very, very old. Also recommend taking a boat trip, not necessarily a regular transport boat, but a private boat trip. Often if you wander along the shores, you'll find one. You can probably also search Google or ask your hotel concierge and they'll find one for you. That was really, really fun experience. Finally, there's a couple of really exclusive restaurants that I highly recommend visiting. They're both rooftop or very high locations, so the views are incredible. The first one is the Sunset Bar and Grill, which is definitely worth a visit. Also also Mukellef, and I'll put links to these in the video description. That one was incredible. There were some very famous basketball players whilst we were there as well. I didn't know who they were, but apparently they were famous. But you will need to pre-book, so get your table booked before you leave for Istanbul, otherwise you won't get to eat there. A tip as well, if you're flying from Copenhagen, Pegasus is the cheapest way to get there, pretty much the cheapest. Also Turkish Airlines of course, but Pegasus always seems to be the best value generally. So about to get on the plane now. Fortunately the Turkish pilots fly better than the Turkish drivers, that's for sure. If you're going to Istanbul, have a really good time. Comment on this video as well if you've been to Istanbul. What did you enjoy visiting the most? And remember to hit subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Thanks very much for watching.